Hi, Dan Steven Erickson here, songwriter, and today I'm going to do something different. Songwriting is essentially telling stories. Some songs are more story songs than others. A lot of my songs have the element of story in them, and there are some stories in life that don't come across as well in a song. And so I've done a lot of traveling in my life, and I've seen a lot of weird things and odd things and met strange people and cool people and odd people. It's just, you get more experience in life and you have more stories to tell. I told stories in my books. A Train Called Forgiveness is the first book that I wrote, and that book is full of little stories as well as the overarching story about my life as a kid in a cult. So A Train Called Forgiveness is actually based off a train trip that I took when I was trying to figure out as an adult what happened to me as a kid and how I could get rid of some of that baggage that I was carrying around. And there was an interesting incident that happened on that trip in Memphis, Tennessee. So I was coming from Nashville back to Memphis. And by the way, you cannot take a train from Nashville to Memphis. There's no Amtrak from Nashville to Memphis. So I took the bus from Nashville to Memphis. And I got into Memphis, and it was the old bus depot. It's no longer there, I don't think. I think they've combined the train station and the bus depot now. But I got into Memphis, and there's this old bus depot, and there's this little cafe in the bus depot. And I'm down to like my last $40 maybe. This was 1988 or 89. $40 is more than it is today, but it still wasn't much. And I still had to get from Memphis clear back to Seattle, right? So I ordered myself something small in the cafe. I think just an order of fries, if I remember right. So I'm sitting there and I'm eating my fries. And this African-American young man approaches me. And I noticed the whole side of his head is caved in. So in my book, A Train Called Forgiveness, I refer to him as the man with his head caved in. The whole side of his head's literally caved in. I think there was a plate in there or something. So he comes up to me and he says, "Hey, are you going to go to the train station?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I am." And he goes, "A taxi to the train station costs about $15 or $20. I'm down to my last $40 or $50 here." So he goes, "I'll carry your bags and walk you to the train station for $5." I'm a little iffy about this. I don't know the guy. I'm in a strange city. I'm worried he might have people out waiting for us to come out, and then they'll mug me and take my guitar and my luggage. So I'm like, "No, man, it's okay. It's okay." I'm sitting there and I'm eating my fries, and he just sits down by himself. He's sitting there, and I start thinking about him. I'm like, this guy seems pretty harmless. He looks like he's in sad shape too. So I went back to him and I said, "You know what? I'll take you up on that offer." And so it was the coolest thing. Here's what happened. So he took me on a little private tour of downtown Memphis. He took me to Beale Street. I had no money, so we couldn't afford to go in and have a beer at one of the blues clubs, but we stood outside of the blues clubs and listened to the blues for 10 or 15 minutes. And then he took me up to the statue of Elvis, and we sat there for a little bit, and I think he had a smoke. I don't believe I was smoking at the time, but I think he had a cigarette. And on the way, he told me his story, and his story was really rather sad. Now, I don't know how much I can believe, but his head was caved in, right? The whole side of his head was caved in. So what he told me is he had been homeless for months because he had been the victim of a hit-and-run accident. Somebody just ran him down in the street, apparently, and just kept going. And so he had been in the hospital, he had been in rehab for his issue with his head being caved in. He had spent a lot of time there, and then when he got out, he had no place to go, and so he was living on the streets. He was homeless, essentially. And so here, this guy's giving me, for $5, he's walking me from the bus station to the train depot, because they worked together then. And so he's walking me along, and he takes me to the hotel where Martin Luther King, the Lorraine motel where Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we go and we look at that, and and he's telling me that story, and I asked him, I said, don't you want some kind of revenge? Aren't you angry? Don't you want to find this person that harmed you? And he's like, no. He's like, I'm okay. I just want to let it go and forgive. And I'm thinking, wow, this was a lesson to me, that this guy who'd been ran over by a car is willing to forgive the person who ran him over. And I get pissed off about, some little thing, like somebody, shortchanging me at a gas station, right? And so he said, yeah, it's okay, man, I'm all right. So I wound up giving him $10 instead of 5, even though I'm down to my last 40 or 50. I gave him about $10, and of course, what he did with it is he stopped at a little liquor store, bought himself a bottle, and put it in his pocket. So apparently he was, he was a drunk or an alcoholic. We kept walking along, and he goes, hey man, the places on Beale, their beer prices are really high, but there's a place right by the train station, and their beer prices are much better. Would you buy me a beer? I'm like, sure, why not? I had 3 hours to wait for the train that came in the middle of the night, or 2 in the morning or something. And so we went into this bar, and I was the only white guy in the whole place. So I felt comfortable being with him. And we sat in there, and I think we actually had 2 beers apiece. I paid for it. Now I'm down to $25 to get from Memphis all the way back to Seattle via California. But I bought him a beer or 2, and we drank a beer. And then I still had about an hour left for my train. It was like midnight or something in Memphis. And we get out in the street, and he thanks me, and I thank him. And he points me out. He goes, the train station is just about a block that way. And so he points it out, and I start walking that way. And I turn around to just say, hey, thanks again. And he's gone. It was the oddest thing. Now, chances are he just went in a different direction, and I didn't note it. But he was gone. And so that was really interesting, that he was just gone. And then I got to the train station, and I got to tell you, that old train station in Memphis, you went down these dark, damp, musty stairs, and you sat in this little cement waiting room, and it was kind of creepy. But I got there, waited for my train, and took off. But the whole thing was interesting. The man with his head caved in, and his sense of forgiveness, and his sense of just letting the past go. I got a lesson from that, and it's part of my book, A Train Called Forgiveness. So if you ever get the chance and you want to check out my book, you can get it at Amazon.com. The book is about my upbringing in a cult. I was a kid in a cult. My parents made a mistake, moved to a cult, and I was a kid from 10 to 16 in that cult. And then in the book, the story is about a guy named Andy, who's really me, Andy Burden, and he travels around the country in a train to try to find himself in his mid to late 20s, and looks back on his experience in the cult. So that's why the book is called A Train Called Forgiveness. And he meets all these people along the way in this story that are outcasts and marginalized, but they're forgivers. So that's my story. Songwriters are storytellers too. And so I thought I'd tell that quick story this time today instead of a song. And you might check out the book. It's at Amazon. You can check out my website. It's there, danstevenerickson.com. And if you ever want to come on the channel, sing a song, tell a story, talk about music, get in touch with me at danstevenerickson@gmail.com. That's all for today, and we'll see you next time.